like to welcome you all to our 11th session of the Professional and Academic Development Series, PADS. This is an event organized by our research group, EILA, Equipo de Investigación en Lingüística Aplicada, and the emphasis in ELT, which is the emphasis I coordinate from the Interinstitutional Doctoral Program of Universidad del Valle. Today, we are going to have a very special session on the topic of interculturality in language teaching. This is a follow-up of a previous pad we had a month ago when we were talking about culture. So today we want to extend the discussion into the idea of intercultural communication, interculturality in language teaching. So we have three scholars that have been working on the area of intercultural communication. And the first person that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Germana Carolina Soler. She's a PhD in language sciences from the University of Montpellier. She's the director of the Modern Languages program at Universidad de Caldas. And her research interests include sociolinguistics and intercultural mediations. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation, Germana. And I would also like to introduce Dr. Beatríz Peña Dix. She is a PhD in education from the University of Durham in the UK. She is an associate professor in the Department of Languages and Cultures at Universidad de los Andes. And she's been working in the area of intercultural studies for a long time. And his areas of interest include language teaching pedagogies, bilingualism, interculturality, and the development of intercultural competence. We have my dear colleague, Carlo Granados Beltrán. He is a PhD in education from Universidad Santo Tomás. He is the academic director of the BA in bilingual education at Universidad ÚNICA. And his work focuses on teacher education and interculturality, cultural studies, and decolonial approaches in ELT. And he has been a guest professor in our program, which I'm very happy. So again, I'd like to express my gratitude to you for accepting this invitation. I'm very happy to have, these great scholars helping us dig a little bit more into this very complex topic of interculturality. I would also like to say that in the case of Germana, her area of work has been mostly in the area of French. So she speaks English, and she says she will speak in English as much as she can, but she says that she can also use Spanish, so which is not a problem because this is a multilingual country, right? So Germana, I just want you to feel very comfortable to navigate in the language you prefer, but also I have to say that many of us are not very fluent in French.
Don't worry, I'm not going to use French today. English and Spanish if it is necessary. And I thank you very much for this invitation, this very kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues, Dr. Peña, Dr. Granados, and Dr. Aldemar. I think it's always a pleasure to talk about interculturality. So I'm sure we're going to have a great moment today.
Absolutely. So let's start with this, and I would like to thank everyone who is just arriving. For example, our coordinator of research group EILA, Carlos. He has just arrived. Thank you, Carlos, for joining us today, Carlos Alberto Mayora. So let's just get down to today's activity and discussion. And first, what I'm going to ask you is to introduce yourselves in a 5-minute statement, and tell us a little bit about how you have personally constructed the idea of interculturality. And you can also tell us a little bit about the traditions and authors that have inspired your views. So that's gonna be like the first part of this, and then we're gonna go to some other questions, and later we're going to have questions from the audience. So who would like to start?
I can start if you want.
Yes, sure.
So, well, you already introduced me. I would like to talk mainly about how I began getting interested in this topic of interculturality. And I have to say that the very first time that I began like wondering about culture in a deeper way in interculturality was some years ago. And actually I lived in France for 11 years. And being in France, after some time, I began like saying that these French people are so weird. And every time I met a French person, I was saying it's not possible. Every single person I met in France is complaining about everything. They get angry easily. They have to say merci all the time in a simple conversation. So I was thinking, okay, they're so weird, and I was the only normal one in France. I was saying I'm the Colombian one in France, and I'm quite normal, and those French are so weird. And at that moment, after some time, I say, no, there is something more. It's not possible that every single French person that I meet is weird, is strange. And it was, in this way that I began like looking in a deeper way about culture, interculturality. And then after I started my first master, and I began studying about interculturality, but it was in a deeper way when I started my PhD in the University of Montpellier in France. And I have to say that my influence comes first at the conceptual level from the European authors, because of course my school was there. So European authors who developed this notion. And I'm talking about Clanet, I'm talking about Verban, Béacon, Abdallah Pretsey, Byron. And it was in France or in Europe, this interculturality at the very beginning, it made part of the process of an integration of new migrants in France and in Europe. So it was the way I began getting interested in that. I don't know if now maybe we talk about the definition of interculturality, or we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that would be great if you give us your take on it.
Okay, so in a concrete way, interculturality has to do with all the interactions concerned by the contact of two or more different cultures. And interculturality, in its foundations, and this is the challenge, does not guarantee the success of the interaction. The fact that we talk about interculturality and that we got two different cultures in contact, it doesn't mean that we are having really a successful interculturality. So it does not guarantee the success of the interaction, but interculturality can propose tools to optimize the interaction. For example, avoiding cultural shocks. But it corresponds in reality to punctual interactions, and this is very personal, and it's according to my school. Interculturality corresponds to a transitory stage that must lead to another stage. And in this point, I would like to refer to Christian Purin, who has, he has not invented, but he has developed that co-culturality. And in Latin America, in Latin America, it's not the same thing. Of course, the context of interculturality in Latin America and in Europe is not the same thing. But in Latin America, I can see that it happens, the same thing happens. It means the interculturality itself can reflect an incompleteness. And that's why, because we are in a context of diversity, that's why we go further and we go to critical interculturality. So we talk about that top-down policies, and we talk even about inclusive interculturality. So in my humble opinion, this first concept of interculturality is a first stage, and it's a transitory stage that can lead us to something further, and I will talk about that later.
Thank you, Germana. Just a quick question. So I see a lot of your background has to do with sociolinguistics, right? Is your view of interculturality highly influenced by the field of sociolinguistics?
Yes, yes, because we consider when you are in the field of sociolinguistics and you talk about the social act, which is communicating in a specific context. For me, it's not possible to put interculturality inside. Of course, it makes part of that sociolinguistic field, and when you put in practice a language in a certain context, the same things happens with that interaction that you are going to have with a different culture, and of course is inside a specific sociolinguistic context. So of course for me it's very related. It's inside.
Thank you. So why don't we listen to Beatríz? And I'm using your names directly because this is a dialogue that we're holding between colleagues and friends. So you will forgive me if I am, you know, going over the very formality of the occasion.
It's perfect. It's perfect. First of all, thank you very much, Jose Aldemar, for inviting me over, and thank you all for taking the time to share this conversation. Well, you know, thank you for the question. In fact, when you were talking about the question, you just put me, you know, to the wall with the sword, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, my process of interculturality has been a very weird process because remember, I am an ELT. Okay, so my first principles in life were ELT, English language teaching. So I, in the search for looking for something else than communicative approaches, my readings got me to interculturality. Okay, so my first stage in front of interculturality was like, wow, can we do this with English language teaching? I like it. Okay, and then during and after my PhD studies, I realized that I had to experience my own interculturalities to further really understand the other interculturalities. So, you know, for me, my intercultural process of learning about interculturality or meta-interculturality process was like regarding to myself into different mirrors in how to see interculturality. You know, for me, interculturality is an intentionally established relationship with diversity. Okay, for me, it's something you pursue, and diversity meaning today not languages, not nations, any kind of diversity. Okay, so this interculturality works like, and I agree with Germana. Like for me, it's not a first stage as such, but I understand interculturality as a continuum. Okay, that you need to move on. So I started by having this strong British influence. Well, I don't know if you I don't know if you know that Byram used to be my professor. Okay, so well, okay, so I was so proud. Okay, I am working with Professor Byram, and now okay, I love Byram, but you know now I go like, okay, Byram, just leave me alone and let me experience my own intercultural issue here. Okay, so in the first moment, I just tied up my shirt of British interculturality as a beginning to make the relationship with ELT and a pedagogical I would say a pedagogical proposal, if you want, a pedagogical proposal to see language in a different way, English language teaching more concisely. However, exploring interculturality further took me to my own culture and interculturality, right? So how interculturality is seen in the country, different perspectives, whatever narrow or broad perspectives about African Colombians, about Aboriginal Colombians, etc. So I had a type of backwash and washback process in my own interculturality, even though I still support that it is a type of relationship you establish with diversity. But today I understand it as something broader, something that needs to be freed. And here, I really like Durbin's new book, last year books. The first chapter is Whose Interculturality? So whose interculturality are we talking about when you cite things on interculturality? So it is a process that every scholarly, if you want, every school, every place needs to experience to build own concepts and practical implications on interculturality. Still, I think that the idea of interculturality, I still bet for it. I still go for it. And I think that it really, it is an encounter with otherness. And when interculturality adds to or isn't, no, let me put it all the way around. When language learning and language teaching are seen from an intercultural perspective, it really broadens the perspective to teach and learn the language in a more global community building sense. So this is like my take, but I have to confess that I started by the narrow way, and then after a while, I started widening my own perspectives.
Thank you, Beatriz.
Okay.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense, because we all pay due respect to all of those who were our professors and who like push the field ahead. But at some point when you start owning all of those concepts and then you relate it to your life as you did, you start looking at those concepts more from not only the context of your own particular community, but the context of your own, I would say, mindness, your own self. Very interesting. And then we hopefully we'll be able to talk more about the idea of otherness and the role on interculturality. Now, Carlo, would like to hear from you about this.
Okay, thank you, Jose, for having me here, and thanks to my colleagues for their interventions and for everyone to listen to us. I think I had a similar journey to Beatriz and Germana. I first started working with culture when I was at the master's here at Distrital, but it was, let us say, a more neutral perspective, if we can say, or probably an critical one, like probably how do I make students become familiar with British culture or American culture through pedagogy. That was my idea at the beginning. Then, as the journey of my colleagues, I studied British Cultural Studies, an ELT in England. And so I had the influence, or when I was studying, I read other authors like Stuart Hall and Story, all those authors from the Birmingham Cultural Studies Center. And I took a more critical view. Of course, when I was there, I was studying British culture and how they see culture critically. But when I read those authors, I somehow translated that theory to what happened to me and to what happened here in the country. And I was like, okay, so probably I need to see this with a more critical perspective, and interculturality is not probably what I had in my mind at the beginning. Then I started the PhD, and in the PhD, I explored all these Latin American authors like Catherine Walsh and all the decolonial ones, Mignolo and Grossvogel, etc., etc. And then it sort of opened my eyes to a new perspective. Like, okay, I hadn't seen this in this way. I hadn't seen the colonial traditions in the country. I was very, let us say, oblivious to it. I didn't see it. So now the perspective that I have towards interculturality is a bit more critical. I do not reject like all the traditions of the British cultural studies and all the work that Bairam has done, for example. But then I see interculturality in a more critical perspective, basing this idea on culture as a side of a struggle for recognition. Like we all say that, or probably we understand interculturality as different cultural groups living together and probably interacting with one another. But there is a fact there, and is that when those groups interact with one another, there are differentials of power, right? For example, what Beatriz was saying about Afro-Colombians, indigenous population, women and men, gay people. So interculturality is like, or I see it in the same ways as Walsh, as this project, this political project to like make those inequalities visible and also attempt to uh, reduce. I wouldn't say solve because that's like too utopian, but at least make that visible and try to incorporate actions that contribute to the change. So that's how I see interculturality at this moment. I say at this moment because probably I will continue reading and exploring, and my mind will expand or change in the future, but that's how I see it now.
Thank you, Carlo. So we have here three different perspectives, you know. One which is more from a sociolinguistic perspective, more focused in the act of the intercultural act in interaction. Then we have one more perspective, which is Beatriz, who draws more generally from, you know, like the tradition of intercultural education. And then you have a particular side which is starting with um, cultural studies, and which, you know, cultural studies by nature are critical, but they focus more on popular culture, right? And then you've been able to transition into the study of, you know, culture, you know, a broader perspective, um, that also touches with the pedagogical and the interaction. So that's very interesting, because you three are, you know, like situated in three different spaces, you know, with lots of overlapping, but you know, like you can't deny how you were educated in some way. You keep the roots to certain concepts and visions. That's part of our you know, education. One question that I've seen people wondering is, what would be the distinction between interculturality and intercultural communication? Germana, do you want to address that question?
Okay. So I think interculturality is a concept that defines situations of contact between cultures during an interaction. And as I already said, it does not guarantee the success of the interaction. So the objective is, in a practical way, to propose tools such as otherness, representation, social representations, of course, culture. And I think that on the other hand, intercultural communication has directly the objective of a successful interaction and the implementation of communicative elements that convey the principles of interculturality. That's like the difference that I can give now. Of course, intercultural communication has to do with understanding different culture, language, and all the customs of people who come from different societies, different cultures, But again, I have to say, and I return to my first point, as when I say interculturality as a transitory way or as a transitory stage, the interaction of the intercultural communication, I consider too that is a transitory way for a greater objective in context of diversity like Latin America. That's what I have to say about this.
Okay, so Beatriz or Carlo, who would like to address this question?
I can go ahead with building on some of Germana's ideas. Well, you know, I think that it's a very intrinsic type of matryoshka relationship, like one being embedded into the other, but at the same time in this synergic relationship. I think that I still claim that interculturality tends to be a type of intentionally based relationship with diversity. This diversity, you know, escapes any kind of frontiering. So I don't think that it's necessarily a nation-based relationship or a language-based relationship or, you know, different nations, different culture in quotes, but any kind of relationships, generational relationships, working relationships, differences you have between your parents and yourself, with colleagues, you know, with different political parties and ideas. So this is the kind of intentionally established relationship. While I see intercultural communication, of course, is a type of communication between this diversity, but still, you know, I see language in the center, at the core, and I see how the relationship between language, whatever language, I mean sign language or a verbal language, non-verbal language, dialects, creoles, and any kind of languages, written language. I see this language with the relationship language culture at the core of intercultural communication. And this communication builds on cultural realities, builds and rebuilds on cultural realities, as Freire used to say. It's a type of recreation of culture. So I think that intercultural communication is not only communicating or just trying to convey meanings with other cultures, but still create and recreate culture every time you establish this communication.
Thank you. How would Carlo answer this question?
I agree with Beatriz in many aspects. Well, based on what I said before about interculturality as a political project and like to look for this equity in the relation among groups, I see intercultural communication as the means where we can, one of the means where we can probably get there. And is this exchange of meanings, yes, but not limited to that. But it's the exchange of meanings that are attached to certain cultural characteristics. Like, for example, what Beatriz was saying about political ideologies, for example, or related to gender, or related to race. So it's how we communicate with the others, but bearing in mind those different characteristics that we have that we may consider cultural. That's how I see it. And of course, language plays a particular role there because if I am coherent with my critical position, language plays an important role in perpetuating discrimination and the meanings that we transmit, or the not only the language but the signs that we transmit, all the work we do with systems of representation contribute to transmit certain ideas and to maintain discriminatory practices. So I think that's where intercultural communication can be analyzed with this critical lens.
Yes, absolutely. Language is at the center of intercultural communication, but I would also say that we also have to be critical of this perspective that reduces communication to language. As we know, yeah, I work in the field of intercultural and multimodal communication, and there's so much you can do as far as making meanings without using language. So that's why intercultural communication, as centered on the analysis of how language perpetuates or facilitates intercultural dialogue, must also be expanded to looking at other ways of meaning making that are not only, as Carlo was saying, we should look more at design, design in semiotic terms. I wanted to go back to a little bit the idea of otherness, and I'm saying this because in philosophy, they think of otherness as that which is not me, right? That which is strange to me, and they define it like the other person, but it could also be something that is strenuous to me, like for example, being sick. That which makes me see that there is something that is a phenomenon that's of me, an animal that's it's part of otherness. Otherness is everything that's not me. All right, that's very interesting and applied to human beings, and all of the categories that Beatríz was outlining, race, gender, ethnicity, social class, and so on. So what is the role of otherness in intercultural communication and interculturality?
The question is for everybody.
Feel free to jump in, yes.
So what is the role of otherness? I would like to, I like a definition that Abdallah Pretsey a donné, that she gave of otherness, altérité, and she makes like a comparison between, she mentions the mirror effect. So when you are in front of the other culture, you have like a mirror, and with that mirror, you can know better yourself. And I think one of the problems is that sometimes we take it for granted, we consider that we already know our culture perfectly. And when you have that effect of mirror in front of the other person, you can know better your values, your origins. You can understand that maybe the different one is not the other one. The different can be yourself. So of course that otherness, and I think I said it before, is one of the tools, and it's one of the things that we have to develop ourselves, but we have to work inside the classroom, because we are not always ready to see ourselves through the other one. It's not easy, because you see the other one and you judge the other one. So, okay, they are different, they talk a different language, but it's not easy for yourself to judge yourself through the other one and say, okay, this is how it works in my own culture. This is what I have to do to have a good interaction with the other one. We have the tendency to judge the other one, and you are not the other one. You are not the one who are different. So that's why, of course, it's central. And that's the same thing with social representations and otherness. I think those tools are absolutely central in the classroom and in life in general.
Thank you, Germana. Beatríz, when you first talked about your view of interculturality, you seemed to mention something that sounded to me like you othered yourself when you talked about the meta interculturality.
Yes. For me, the concept of otherness, maybe it's okay. I am not really. It is my position, right? But I think that I have like some perception, right, that this otherness, in fact, for me, otherness is positionality in the building of identities. Okay, So for me, otherness is not a fixed concept. Otherness for me is like when you use the concept of the West, okay? Western, okay? So where are you standing to say that it is the West? Or where are you standing both ideologically and physically to establish it is the West? So where are you standing? What is your positionality to say you are in the sameness or in the otherness positioning? For me, it's like an inward outward process of seeing people, including yourself.
I will take that that Beatriz just said. I don't remember if it is Claire Cramsh or if it is Stuart Hall, maybe, I'm not sure, who talks or who says that cultures both includes and excludes. So at some point, we are going to be, well, we are going to believe that we are in this homogeneous culture and we belong to something, and therefore we are us, right? But and there are some other people, the ones that don't belong to this culture, that are the others. They are othered. But at some other moments, we are the ones who are going to be othered, right? So it's, as Beatriz was saying, somehow is dynamic, because I mean, who is the other? Who the other is depends on the situation in which we are interacting. So I think to talk about otherness, probably we can take some elements of Bairam about empathy, like how do I play myself in the role of the other, and also to see myself as another, right, in the same culture. Because probably I consider myself homogeneous in that society, but probably I am not. I mean, probably homogeneously speaking, ideologically speaking, we say, or we could say that this is a Catholic country, but I am an atheist. So then I am other. I am the other in that supposed homogeneous society in which we live. So I think we have to think of otherness as a concept that uh, has a potential, but that we have to see it contextually, right? In particular situation.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you very much. And very interesting, you know, because it's when you see, it's like when you see the other, you realize that you yourself are the other. You know, it's called basically what Claire Gramsci says. You know, um, so I wanted to move on. We have a question. We said we were going to answer questions at the end, but we have a question that's kind of similar to this discussion. It goes along with the discussion. And one of the participants, Juan Carlos, says, why do you think we have this constant need to create a homogeneous society? Maybe one of you would like to answer this question, which is along the lines the topic we've just discussed.
Sorry, we're talking about the question in the chat, right?
Yes, right.
Um, I think it has to do with human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always tend to classify things. And so you are black, you are white, you are red, you are yellow, or you are a man or you're a woman. If you are in between, we are in trouble. You are gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. We're always classifying. So I think it's part of the human nature, like trying to organize things to make sense of the world. And in that pursuit of classifying things to understand the world, we tend to homogenize. Of course, there are some other elements. We can take a look at, for example, history, right? Like how um, when the nation states were starting to be built, they had this idea of create a homogeneous society that implied having the same race, speaking the same language, and somehow having the same shared history and meanings. So I think it's more like part of human nature, that idea of homogenizing classifying and homogenizing, I think.
I strongly agree with you, Carlo. I strongly agree with you, and it made me think of, for example, I'm teaching a course entitled "An Intercultural Reading of Dracula," and you know, reading Gothic novels gives you the perfect example. What you know, with regarding to what fits and what doesn't fit. Okay, so you need to be in a Victorian society, you know, refined, apparently refined, well off, etc. But if you have something different, it is necessarily not only in Dracula, but for example, in Frankenstein, in British literature, then you have the monster, the abomination, what is out of society, what is out of the rules, you know, something that is unspokenly that doesn't belong. So, you know, I find in my course a very, very good example of what you're saying, Carlo. Thank you.
Jose, I think I agree with my colleagues too. But I think if we talk in terms of interculturality, this is not exactly, is my personal opinion, is not exactly what interculturality looks for. I mean, we talk about reciprocity, we talk about symmetry, okay, but not an homogeneous society. And it's a construction, okay? We have to construct a culture together inside a culture where there is a big variety. But I don't think that's the final goal or objective of, of course, if we talk in interculturality dimension, we talk about reciprocity and symmetry, yes, but not exactly homogeneous society. If we are, I mean, if we work interculturality in the right way, I think.
Yeah. You know, when you know, like the question or the argument that Carlo proposes as far as looking at, you know, this tendency of human beings to homogenize, you know, to try to look for, you know, what it's similar to me so that I feel more at ease. Yeah, I think that's part of human beings, but we also have to think that at some point when you read history, you know, like for example, Europe was a very intercultural a continent before, when there was not when modernity kicks in and we talk about state nations, and then they said, oh yeah, you know, like we have to establish a borderline, and then we have to you know, focus on establishing a language that you know, because if we have people who speak different languages, that's kind of like suspicious. We have to have loyalty to the nation, and then we have to have one language. And so that's how the discourse of homogenization starts developing, you know, to the point where we have to, you know, think the same, have the same religion, have the same epistemologies, and the same axiologies, and the same ontologies, and all of these things that, if you think of what happened in the invasion of America, is what happened. You know, they were trying to homogenize, and if you're not able to do that, we'll have to disappear you. And that is still happening. You know, if you see the world right now, and so what Andres in the chat says is people feel dreadful. You know, people feel scared. You know, people feel scared of what's new, what is not like me. And that's why homogenizing helps. You know, I feel more I feel safer when I know that we both have the same, we both like the same, we both think similarly, and so on. Yeah, it's part of, you know, human being, but there is also the infusion of all of the ideologies of modernity and the idea of homogenization. Let's move on to a topic of pedagogy. You know, let's mix this up a little bit. Now, if we're going to make interculturality part of the curriculum, what is it that we will have to teach? How do we integrate it in the curriculum of, you could say, language education, but more broadly as you have been proposing, especially Beatriz, uh, in the general curriculum, because this is not only for language education or foreign languages, this is for life, because we're talking about diversity. So how can we do that? Tricky question.
Well, I would try to say something in relation to that. Well, first of all, there is no only one answer, right? Because it depends on many aspects, like the context, the situation, the policies, etc. But I would say that we need to bear in mind students' cultural experiences, right? Like how can we incorporate that into what we're doing? Um, the context, right? For example, what we do, or well, not we, but other people, because I don't work with that, with community-based pedagogies, place-based pedagogies that somehow approach the context to the language classroom, right? I think something that is very important as well, and that sometimes we are afraid to tackle, is conflict. How we include uh, experiences and analysis of conflict in the curriculum. I'm not saying like not only the national conflict, of course, that would be important, but how can we uh, help students deal with conflict more successfully? Because I think that in situations of communication, as what Germana was saying at the beginning, in those situations of interaction, there is likely, I mean, there is the possibility of having a conflict. How do you deal with that? How you use the language to uh, surpass that, right? And um, another one, I'm taking this from Phipps and Levine. They also talk about capacities. They talk about capacities rather than competencies. But in terms of capacities, it has to do with what I mentioned before, how to use language to deal with conflict, but how to use language for many other purposes, like not only, you know, what the bilingual program says about being competitive in the economic world and so on, but how do I develop in the students the skills to use language, and not only the mother language, but also the foreign language to, or for intercultural learning. How do I use it to learn about other cultures and about other people? That's like my attempt, very broad, of what I would say about the curriculum.
Can I jump in?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. I agree with Carlos' suggestions, and I would say that the question is how to include issues of interculturality into the curriculum, right? I think that the first big start maybe should be, this is a work in progress also, okay? It's $1 million question. I think that maybe we need to just start by changing the objectives of the curriculum or transforming, but not in a vertical way, but we need to listen to students to build upon a more horizontal type of dialogue, right? To build the basis, not in a vertical way, but in a horizontal way. Knowing and listening, maybe students shouldn't be given too many answers, but they should be asking many more questions. And then maybe we could have some directions on how to make this click, this integration. However, I think that if we think of having some elements of human rights education and peace building education, education for citizenship, and maybe we think about some of these principles as inspirational principles. I am not saying that this is the path, this is the route, but maybe this can give us many hints on how to redirect some traditionals, still issues on traditional education that wouldn't let education evolve towards more flexible, critical thinking, intercultural approaches. So maybe training more, not training, because training is an anti intercultural concept. Okay, so maybe providing opportunities to educate people more, not as simple learners or as single learners, but as researchers, as ethnographers, little ethnographers, people who observe, who plan, who discuss, who find solutions for certain tasks and problems in the classroom. Maybe if we just stop having our students reciting contents, but instead they have to do some case studies or analyze case studies. I don't mean like to analyze case study in full. You just can go, you know, with the level of students, trying to provide tools here and there, just to broaden the minds that learning is not just filling the empty glass. I don't know, working, interviewing, looking for cultural informants, but we need to be careful because cultural informants might be, you know, you have to be wary not to take the informant as the representative of the whole group and then jumping into stereotypes. I want to give an example of this. You know John Corbett, right? So John Corbett with another colleague from Brazil, Hugo Dart, they plan every year an international classroom. It's an open, free classroom called the Hemisphere Connections. Here you have 10 intercultural reflecting tasks, but also the aim is to put into practice English, okay? So you have English learners from all around the world. Last year we had people from Greece, from Poland, from Colombia. Some of my students were participating, etc. So you had, I don't know, 56 students debating, talking, posting pictures and videos about their lives, about how they understand culture, how they understand interculturality, about celebrations. Some of these issues are tangible, visible culture, but anyhow, it is a good start, okay? So I think that we just need to think education in a different way, just to achieve the goal. Sorry, I was getting carried away. Thank you.
What is your take on this, Germana?
Jose Aldemar, for me, answering this question is not that easy because, okay, I would say, and before, when I listen questions in a similar way, okay, I say it's not very difficult. In the curriculum, we need to include in a very explicit way the work of social representations. We have to deconstruct stereotypes. But for me today, giving a clear answer to how exactly we can, I mean, which is the way to begin changing curriculums, I had to think, and I'm sorry, but I think in a more general way. And I think we were talking about that, Aldemar, in the interview that you were having some days ago, because I consider that an intercultural pedagogical practice requires going beyond this unilateral interculturality as it appears in the legal text, and it is generally applied in the country. And I mean, this how to say, this legal text, of course, this goes to the universities too, and it can have an influence in the construction of those curriculums. So I think that in this sense, at a pedagogical level, the activities require that students, first, I think the first step, I don't know how exactly we can do it inside the curriculum, but I think that students who are not from ethnic minorities should have cultural and linguistic practices that concern native languages and cultures. And it is not only students from ethnic minorities who made the effort, or to whom, and I think you already listened to me saying this thing, specific activities, how to explain that? It's not only students from ethnic minorities who made the effort or to whom specific activities are devoted. So in order to achieve that true interculturality, for me, it's very important to begin, but maybe you are not agree with me, but I think we should begin by intraculturality, not interculturality. And to arrive to that changes in the curriculum, if we don't have that intraculturality in our minds, in our practices, I think the effort is good to, of course, we have to begin doing changes, but in a society as Colombia, we need to think that inside a culture, we have that big and amazing and complex diversity. And that's what that's what intraculturality does. Before inside the same territory, because we are not, for example, in Europe, in the United States, when we have people from Germany, Italy, Latin America, we're inside a country, we have that diversity, but with Colombians who made part of different minority groups or not. So for me, that's why it's difficult, and I consider we have to begin by that. But if I have to say in a concrete way, in the curriculum, okay, let's work intraculturality, let's work social representations, not about English people, not about American people, French people. Before that, we need to understand our social representations inside our country. And after that, we can go farther and go to see how French behave, how Americans behave. I'm talking for the of course, the foreign language classroom. So that's what I have to say for that.
Thank you. So when you mention all of these possibilities of integration, which, as you say, it's pretty complex question to answer, you know, because of all of the different dimensions you will have to take into account. I was thinking that there is different ways this can be implemented, you know, because when I say curriculum, you know, we tend to think, all right, so this is like, as Germana was saying, like if we're going to change curriculum, this is, you know, a big challenge, you know, because it's not only changing the English syllabus, you know, it's changing the curriculum, and then you can go kind of like to a point where you say, I'm going to change the curriculum of English language or foreign language education, but then you say it's not enough, because if I can sell you the idea of how important diversity is, but then you go to social studies, you go to biology class, and then you go to these other classes, and that doesn't make any sense, because it's weird, because we're talking about all of these ideas, and then I go to this other class and it doesn't seem to apply, you know. So to what is to what extent, you know, to what degree we have to intervene in the curriculum, that's one big question. And there's other ways of integrating this, you know, just doing it in the class, you know, like you do in your English class, little activities, tasks, reflections, and so on. That's just like, you know, adding one little grain to the cost. But as always, we don't know how really this is going to impact the population. So it's really a big challenge to do it. I was going to jump into then the challenges, right? So what are the challenges that we have if we want to make our classrooms intercultural? And I would say, like, one of the complexities, depending on how you approach this, and I like Anthony Lillicoat's perspective, because he talks about it as an orientation, right? As an orientation to how you approach language education, is that when you come to it, for example, from the perspective of Carlo, then you say, like, oh, you know, like, I have to really go off my boundaries, my disciplinary boundaries, and then you have to bring in justice education, culturally sustaining pedagogies, community-based pedagogies, and that makes it more complex. All right, how can teachers also deal with all of the complexity of these different proposals. I'm just, throwing some of those challenges. What else would you add?
Well, based on the conversations that I have had with teachers, one of the main challenges has to do with the school's policies or ideologies, right? Because sometimes they are going to prevent teachers from speaking about certain things, maybe about sexual orientation and about race or about any other aspects. So that's one of the challenges. Um, Sometimes it's the material, like they are forced to use X material and they have to cover the material no matter what. And one of the suggestions I made, of course, I said it depends on you and how you see the situation going. I'm not going to tell you that it is perfect because my situation is different, is to take advantage of that material in the parts where it has something that could be potentially used in a different way, or that you can approach with the students with with a more critical perspective, or with questions, right? That probably you cannot work the whole thing critically, but you can include one or two questions to work with that reading that probably sets up students thinking about the issue that the text is presenting. Another challenge that I remember teachers mentioning, in fact, it was in the seminar with the doctoral program, time and the number of students, because well, that somehow, for example, we were talking about students as ethnographers, and we talk about cultural responsive pedagogy, and they saw the number of students and the requirements of the school as something that was difficult to manage, right? Like somehow prevented them from implementing certain things. So my advice, as usual, and I said that in all the conversations that I have, go for trial and error. Try one time and see what works, see if it works, see if you can make adjustments. If not, try another strategy and see how it works. Because well, there are many constraints that even if we are the so-called experts, we don't know. I mean, you are the one facing your students in the classroom, facing the context where you are. I can give you ideas, but you will have to check and implement and see how they work.
Beatriz?
You know, I was just listening to Carlo. I was like, I am not sure about this. Of course, again, I am drafting on a prospective answer, you know, because I was thinking about broader issues a little bit beyond, but still affecting the classroom, and maybe how, you know, how I think that the first challenge is current teacher education, right? What Carlo mentioned as, yes, what are you getting in teacher education? What do teacher trainers are giving to trainees in the corpus word trainee, pre-service teachers? What are they doing right now with these concepts? Are they reflecting on these concepts of interculturality? What is teacher education providing to students about this field of study? So I think that this is a big question, because the question really, you know, if you have some foundations and understandings on interculturality and what it means to education, maybe, you know, because I haven't read like such relationship, but maybe possible students in Colombia, right? Because abroad I have read some things, and possibly display some of these concerns when they are going to teach themselves. So you have like a replication issue of expanding knowledge on interculturality. But what happens if teacher education in Colombia is not dealing with the topic? That would be like the first challenge. The second challenge is like jumping out of the comfort zone inside the same teacher education. if you have been taught in a certain way, how do you escape that way you have been taught? It is like, so there is a need to think out of the box with these things that I don't know if this is actually happened or in their way to happen. Also, mistaken assumptions. For example, I think that some teachers or some instructors might think of interculturality as something different, because talking to some other teachers, colleagues, young teachers, researchers, some people, I can feel that there is an equation on cross-cultural analysis and interculturality. So if you are comparing and contrasting issues on culture or what culture entails in the classroom, it is interculturality. So I can see that it is not that. So I think that there are also that one of the challenges is the mistaken assumptions teachers and learners might be holding about the situation. I think, and also interculturality taken as a method, like this is a method, something that we must do because it is in fashion, and maybe we don't want more work, so forget it. It's like instant rejection because it tends to be equated as a method, as the communicative approach or as the audiolingual approach, now the intercultural approach. Well, I am talking about language teaching. In that case, we know that it is not so. So to summarize, I would say that challenges are teacher education and professional development. Do we have the issue on interculturality going on enough to really share this community of knowledge? Mistaken assumptions and interculturality taken as a method or as something it is not.
Beatriz, thank you. I was also thinking that in many cases, so we're saying, so many times teachers kind of like they feel if there's a method that implies, replacing whatever they're doing to try to adapt another type of procedure and so on, which usually takes time, and it is usually replaced by another, which is what usually happens. But also there is the issue that when you say orientation or perspective, it sounds like a more amorphous, like you're doing something and it's like, and many cases teachers say like, but like, tell me what I have to do, like, what is it that I have to do? Because you tell me the orientation, the perspective, and that sounds like very vague. Do you have like the specifics on the thing? And
Yes.
that's something that teachers face all the time. If you say very specific, sometimes they say like, yeah, but like I do it in this way because of my population and so on. But if you say like it's a perspective, is general, like you give general principles, and they yeah, but this is kind of like very unclear. Yeah, I need more specifics. So and we cannot blame the teachers, because this is how teacher education has operated during many years, and especially we're in developing countries like us. Nowadays we are experiencing more cognitive agency, more professional agency than before. We stopped receiving knowledge and now we're appropriating knowledge and constructing knowledge, but we come from that tradition, right? So that's part of the challenge,
Yes, and there is something very important here, just to finish up my point, and is that we talk about we are building knowledge, we are doing this and we are doing that, and yes, this is what happening maybe in your institution and my institution and Carlos and Germana's, but if you as if you travel and check, you can find regions in which where education is really still living the traditional time, and knowledge is very vertical constructed. So I think that is very concerning how how like a renovation for any kind of education would come, not necessarily intercultural education, but like a renewing of the full education system, just to get to the places, to the corners, and to people who really also need it. So it's an additional concern, but yes, I agree with you.
Thank you. Germana, what do you think of all of this?
No, I was saying that I agree with my colleagues. I would like to mention a research that I did like 2 years ago with the professors maybe 3 years ago, the professors of the modern language program of the University of Caldas. And I was looking to know about interculturality and how they were using or implementing this interculturality in the classroom. And one of the first things we could observe was that they were saying, a lot of them, that they didn't know exactly what, I mean, they were making an analogy between culture and interculturality. So the first thing, and I think one of the first challenges, I mean, we're here and we do research about interculturality, and okay, we can have some knowledge about that, but it's not all the teachers. I mean, all the teachers were not educated about interculturality. And that's why we have that resolution from the Ministerio de Educación of 2017. We have that new resolution that says that all the programs in Colombia should work the interculturality. So it means that before, maybe when we started our bachelor degree, we didn't have that information. So in that research, it was where it appeared. Teachers, not all the teachers have clear this work and this concept of interculturality. So I think it's one of the first challenges. It's beginning to change, because with this new resolution, okay, it means that the future teachers, they are going to be, they are being educated, they are beginning to be educated about interculturality. But this is one of the first things. And another thing, another challenge that I think that is more general, I think that one of the problems is that we do not work in an articulated way. So it's not necessary, it's no longer necessary to work in a disarticulated way by considering the political environment on one side, the professors on the other side, the students divided according to their origins. I think we have to, and I don't know if, Jose, you mentioned, okay, we have the autonomy, and when we are in a mainly in public universities, we have freedom with our pedagogy and methodology. But anyway, in this dimension, interculturality, I think we need more, not exactly, I mean, the laws and the political laws should not say exactly what we have to do in the classroom. But I think we have that big change. And when I think about the law 115 of 1994, for example, when we see that interculturality is applied to ethnic minorities and not the rest of the population. So I think we need those big changes in a very global way, and we need to work together. When I see, okay, we talk about that top-down policies and actions, and we have those propositions about top. We have to go from top from the bottom to the top. Okay, but in those new conceptions and ways of working interculturality, I think there is still the problem of this. I don't know if we can say that this articulation. We're still not working together. And I have to repeat again the reciprocity. Interculturality has to do with reciprocity, not necessarily that everybody has to do the same thing, that everybody has to behave in the same way, that everybody has to teach in the same way. It's not that. But of course, we need reciprocity in the process. And so it can be, we need that for doing real changes in the universities, in the education. And I have to mention too the resolution that we have now, and that again they have, of course, they give that freedom to the universities and to the programs. And of course, you have to introduce interculturality in your curriculums, in your programs, but it's still the same thing. We don't have, we are not working together, and I think that's one of the big challenges that we have in Colombia.
Thank you, Germana. I wanted to highlight one of your points. And to tie it up to what Beatríz said before, you know, one of the possibly major misunderstandings is to think that interculturality is equals ethnic groups. You know, I mean, Afro-Colombians and indigenous communities. And we can start by saying, like, using the concept ethnic groups is objectionable by itself, you know, because it means like we are not an ethnic group as the majority mestizo group. You see, have you seen that? That they always say ethnic groups and the mestizo, like we are not an ethnic group. That talks about this view of domination that the majority group to which we belong to has been entitled to, you know, to believe that we are not an ethnic group, like we are very special and they are the other ones who might be the minoritized groups or minorities. So that's one misunderstanding we have, right? And then Beatríz talked about diversity, you know, instead of thinking of, you know, the ethnic group is the diversities that exist in the classrooms and the diversities of human beings on the basis of gender, on the basis of social class, on the basis of political inclination, religious beliefs, in all of these possible diversities that exist that need to be addressed in the classroom in different ways. So thank you very much for those thoughts. And this is how we close. I would also like to thank the audience. We had up to 57 people during this conversation, and they've been very faithful and they have stayed until the end. 48 people. Thank you very much for your questions, your comments, and I hope that this is, you know, one invitation to continue talking about this very important topic. The Doctorado Interinstitucional en Educación, emphasis in ELT. We are working on the area of intercultural communication and interculturality, and this is why we are holding these events. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Jose, for the invitation, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Carlos. Carlo.
Bye, Beatriz.
Germana, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Germana, nice to meet you.
Jose Aldemar, thank you.